Parks and Trails Strategic Plan Development Standing Committee meeting of the TNRD on 6th of March, 2025. Thank you. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nation communities across our vast regional districts, and today are located on the Tk'emlúps, the Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Tk'emlúps, the Secwepemc, and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. Before we begin, I would like to ask corporate officer to provide some details about non-committee members' participation in this meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So as we do have non-members present during this meeting, we do ask that perhaps the committee provide a motion to allow participation. And this is a reminder that the members that have not been appointed, or the board members that have not been appointed, are required, or sorry, do not have the ability to vote on any motions or make any recommendations. They can only participate in a discussion, and that is in accordance with our board procedure bylaw. So if you'd like to make a motion to have the 3 non-member participants attending here, we can proceed with this.
Thank you. Motion is moved by Director Onslow, seconded by Director Thorpe. And do we have all in favor? Opposed, if any? So moved. And additions or deletions from the agenda, do we have any of that? Seeing none, moving forward to the minutes adoption. Can we have a recommendation that the minutes of the Parks and Trails Strategic Plan Development Standing Committee meeting dated November 22nd, 2024 be adopted as circulated?
Move the minutes.
Thank you. Moved by Director Hall and seconded by Director Onslow. All in favor? Opposed, if any? So moved. Moving on to reports, I hand it over to our consultant friends online. Sorry, Mr. Vieira.
Yes, I'll actually put it to Ms. Madden first, if there's anything she wants to say to introduce Patrick. No? Okay.
Good morning, everybody. So I'd like to introduce Patrick Beach, who is the lead on the Parks and Trails Strategic Plan Development from Lees and Associates. Today, he will be introducing draft version 1 of the Parks and Trails Strategic Plan, and then speaking about the next round of engagement and what the next steps are for the plan. So Patrick, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you, Sherry. Good to see everyone again. I would be happy to turn on my camera, but I don't have permission from the host. But just a reminder, my name is Patrick Beach. I'm a landscape architect at Lees and Associates. I'm also joined today by Megan Turnock, principal at Lees, and Lee Campbell, senior planner at Lees. And together, we'll do our best to answer any questions you have today.
And we're just getting you permission to turn on your camera.
There we go.
There you go. We see you.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a presentation that I'll begin sharing. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, we see it.
Great. Okay, so we'll start with a quick project overview, then go into the draft plan and recommendations, as Sherry mentioned. We can pause for discussion and questions, and then I'll go over the plans for round 2 of engagement. We can break again for questions and discussions, and after that, I'll go over the next steps, and we'll have one more opportunity for comments and questions. So first, a refresher on what the plan is looking to accomplish. It will identify the strategic priorities for the provision of both regional and community parks in the TNRD. It will lay out the goals and strategies to guide the delivery of the park service over the next 10 years. It will assess the current state of parks and trails, determine needs and values related to parks and trails through comprehensive engagement, establish a vision and goals, and make recommendations for supporting parks and trails service delivery, and provide an implementation plan. The TNRD Park Service consists of 2 regional parks, 11 community parks, the Blue River Trails Network, and the South Thompson Buoy System, as well as 19 undeveloped parks, which are primarily subdivision parks created through subdivision development. Parks and trails are, of course, also provided by other levels of government, including municipal parks, provincial parks, and provincial recreation trails. I have a project timeline here at the bottom of the screen. A reminder, we kicked off the project in summer 2024. I've just completed the draft strategic plan, phase 3, and we'll soon be launching the second round of engagement. Some of the key themes and findings from the first round of engagement. In the online survey, we found that just over half of the survey respondents were satisfied with the level of service offered by parks and trails managed by the TNRD. Over 40% of survey respondents visit a park weekly. Access to nature was the most valued feature in parks, followed by walking or hiking trails and access to water. Just over half of survey respondents were somewhat or very supportive of a tax increase to support investment in new or improved parks and trails. And there were concerns that parks and trails are not distributed equally throughout the TNRD. Some key takeaways from the stakeholder workshops include that there are many active community recreation organizations working hard to plan, develop, and maintain trails. However, keeping up with maintenance of trails is a challenge for these groups, and permitting and administration are also becoming challenges. Signage improvements are a priority for many stakeholder groups, and accessibility, climate adaptation, and environmental protection are also important concerns. So big picture, some of the key challenges that came out of engagement and background analysis were, for the region as a whole, looking beyond the TNRD's own park and trail service, volunteers maintain most of the trails in the region, and volunteer organizations are reported feeling strained due to a variety of factors, including the ones I mentioned on the last slide. Serving a widely distributed population is always going to be a challenge. Accessibility and wayfinding should be priorities for upgrades in parks. And climate change is challenging outdoor recreation in the region through issues like extreme heat, reduced snowpack, and wildfires. So moving on to the draft plan content, I'll run through the vision, goals, and recommendations. First up, the vision. The draft vision for the TNRD's Park Service is to foster First Nations reconciliation through relationships and partnerships that promote Indigenous culture and values. Grow and manage the regional and community parks and trail system sustainably through partnerships and collaboration for the mutual benefit of residents and visitors. Create opportunities for people to recreate, appreciate, and steward natural areas while ensuring the protection and enhancement of the region's diverse ecosystems. And support community connections, health, and well-being and equitable access to the variety of landscapes and outdoor recreation opportunities across the region. The draft goals for the plan are to foster government-to-government relations with First Nations, support local outdoor recreation organizations that build, maintain, and manage trails in the region, improve collaboration with nonprofits, industry, and other levels of government, establish management and maintenance tools to ensure the long-term sustainability of parks and trails, enhance park experiences for all visitors, and grow the TNRD's supply of parks and trails. So under each goal, we have a series of recommendations. The first recommendations reflect the board's prioritization of reconciliation with First Nations. These recommendations deal with park policy development, opportunities to reflect Indigenous knowledge and culture, the protection of First Nations cultural resources, and the potential of the park for the park system to represent Indigenous place names. The next set of recommendations covers ways for the TNRD to support the local outdoor recreation organizations that build and maintain trails in the regions. What we heard from these groups was not a desire for more trails, but rather for support in maintaining what already exists. So we are recommending establishing a funding mechanism that could help provide funding for maintenance as well as trail planning or development. We have also included recommendations to support volunteer groups in other ways, including support navigating the complex permitting process. The next set of recommendations is aimed at improving collaboration between volunteer groups, resource industries, and other levels of government. The first step here is to establish and host a sub-regional trail working group, or sorry, a series of sub-regional trail working groups, building off models such as the Shuswap Trail Alliance Roundtable and the Blue River Trails Working Group. These groups can be a forum for collaboration on topics like backcountry access and a place to share plans and experiences that impact others at the table. The second recommendation on the screen is to pursue parkland acquisition partnerships. This is about enhancing the TRD's ability to acquire and manage additional parks through partnerships, such as with conservation groups, or through local volunteer associations that currently own and manage parks in the region, but may be looking for support. The next set of recommendations is intended to provide tools to support the TNRD in managing its park assets. Adaptive management refers to a process of ongoing monitoring to learn from the outcomes of one's approach. Park development and management plans can help guide maintenance and help prioritize park improvements. Updating the definitions of regional and community parks can help ensure appropriate levels of service and funding are applied to each park. Goal 5 is about park improvements and opportunities to enhance universal accessibility, to better communicate accessibility considerations, and to implement consistent signage across the park system. Goal 6, the final goal, is about growing the supply of parks and trails. There are recommendations here to develop new parks in priority areas, which have been identified based on analysis of the distribution of parks and trails across the region, including both TNRD parks and provincial parks and trails. In the report, we also make reference to a set of parkland acquisitions and development criteria to ensure that future investments in the park system have maximum recreation benefits and to avoid liabilities. The final recommendation deals with disposing of parkland that is not suitable for development. This refers to the subdivision park designations that the district may have received prior to it gaining the option to take cash in lieu of land designations. I will stop sharing my screen here and pause for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have any questions or comments any members would like to share or attendees? Director Smith.
Thank you. I'm wondering in your, I'm sorry, I don't recall the section that it was mentioned, but you talk about industry. And I didn't see anything about mining or agriculture. I'm just wondering if maybe those aren't as prominent as I think in this area, but I would have thought maybe those would be included as part of our sort of industry in our area.
Yeah, so I'm referring to the sub-regional trail working group idea, and these would feature representatives from whatever industry is prominent in the area. So say in the North Thompson, that might be primarily forestry, but in other regions that could have other types of industry represented. Any industry that has a major impact on the land base would be one to include.
Thank you. Or Director Smith, would you feel that directors of our own electoral areas should if we see something stakeholder that's missed, industries that's missed, we could go back to staff team to add that input at this stage? Would you like to see that? Or
Yeah, I just thought, I just reading through it, it just occurred to me, because obviously mining is sort of in our backyard, but then, yeah, it just occurred to me that, to me, they're prominent industry in our areas, but just that they weren't mentioned. So I was just curious, maybe they have a reason, maybe there was some research around that, but I just wanted to mention it.
thank you, Director Smith. Director Onslow.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of recommendations that this committee could put forward or bring forward. And I find it almost overwhelming when you try to think of how are we going to piece all of this together over the next however many years and guide the principles. One of the things is, the setup of more regional parks, but I don't really have an understanding of what is the definition of a regional park and what would make it qualify as a regional park. So that's one, and then I probably would have a few more supplementals if we can.
Thank you, Director Onslow. To Mr. Vieira.
Yeah, I could speak to that. I'm sure Sherry would jump in as well. Very good question, and it's interesting because it's kind of overlapping actually two of the recommendations. So one of the recommendations, developing more regional parks, and then recommendation number, which one is it? One of the recommendations also says to establish a clear policy on what a regional park is and what a community park is. And that's something as staff we had wanted to make sure gets addressed here, and that would be essentially one of the first actions that we would come out of this strategy with, is having the board adopt clear direction on what is a regional park and what is a community park. And so for the benefit of this committee, I've probably mentioned this before, but currently we have two models for funding parks. What we call community parks are funded by electoral areas, taxation only, so exclusive to that area, and regional parks are funded by the regional service, which is all electoral areas and all municipalities pay into the one single pot. And so we feel like it's important for us to for the board to revisit that and make a clear definition, because we don't have much direction on that. Our current regional parks were created and identified by the board 20 years ago. We haven't changed or talked about what those definitions are. So very good point. I guess to take it a step further from staff perspectives, And what we've, I think, said in this committee before, our sense of what should be included in that definition is a regional park should be targeting more than just a local community, that it will obviously provide community recreation, but also be a draw of tourism and part of an economic development sort of thing. So using an example, one of the services funded by the Regional Park Service is the Thompson River buoy system. So it's not just one electoral area, just one municipality that benefits. It's an ability to take your boat all the way from Tobiano to Chase and back again. And so that I think would recommend to stay as a regional park service.
Thank you. Supplemented by Director Onslow.
Yes, please. Okay, so the buoy system, Little Hell's Gate, would there be other potential regional parks that anyone off the top of their mind could think of?
Yes, don't want to get drawn into this too much because, you know, this will be part of that work that we need to do. But we think boat launches are a good example, especially boat launches on large bodies of water. So I'll use the most obvious example. Currently, the Agate Bay boat launch is a community park just funded by Area O. It is packed every weekend in the summer. People from Kamloops, people from communities all over outside the TNRD come there. It's a major draw. So there's an argument to be made that that should be shifted from a community park to a regional park. And I would throw in that, you know, this idea of developing more regional parks, the idea of, you know, destination trails would be, I would suggest that should be considered as a regional park, not a community park, because it's a draw of tourism.
Thank you. Further supplemental by Director Onslow.
I'll see if anyone else wants to take the mic for a few minutes and then maybe come back.
Sure, Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a question around population numbers. And I have kind of talked to staff a little bit about it and the chair. When we look at the population, we are using in this report, the population minus those on reserve. And I understand that that is kind of the common policy to do it that way. But one of the things, if it isn't too much trouble, is if we could maybe acknowledge that the population is not necessarily just non-First Nations, not on reserve. For example, in my particular area, more than twice, I've got far more residents that live on reserve than off reserve. And I think everybody uses the parks. And while we might not use that in kind of the ratepayer situation, I think we need to acknowledge that those parks are being used by everyone and make sure that we're being inclusive in that. If there could be some kind of appendix or acknowledgement.
Thank you, Director Thorpe. And I had a discussion with the chair and Director Thorpe about this. And what we're proposing we can do as staff is make a change in addition to the appendix where we show two different populations, one including the First Nation band. So there's a recognition of the First Nation population, but we'll leave the calculation of parks served by population as the TNRD residents, just so we're comparing apples to apples when looking at other park services. And I think that if that's acceptable.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Onslow, would you like to continue?
Yeah, sure. Through the process of working with the TNRD and the Blue River Trails working group, I found that was awesome and I really enjoyed how it was set up. And this was before my time of being an elected official with the TNRD. So I'm just curious, does this group go about saying, yes, we do want to establish working groups in specific electoral areas or across, say, the whole of the North Thompson and other areas, et cetera. And then we dedicate staff time again to doing that and coming up with a master plan for the area? Is that the intention of this?
Good question. I think the answer is yes, but I'll kind of back up a bit. Once this strategy is adopted and approved by the board, then we as staff will take every recommendation in here and start working towards implementing those. And so we will be reporting back to the board as we implement all those pieces of that strategy. Thinking off the top of my head, I think it's something we could do either formally or informally with this committee is give you a better sense of what are the easier wins or what order that we would propose starting working through those. But at any time, obviously, the board can give us direction saying, well, item number 20 or recommendation number 21, we want staff to prioritize. But the idea is to capture all of these things of what we're going to do, and then staff need to start implementing them. So I know that's kind of a vague answer, but then when it gets to the actual, what do we do first in those details, like we haven't worked that out yet, but this will be our marching orders to staff to start implementing everything in here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vieira. Director Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I thank you very much for the report. You answered a lot of my questions sort of as I was working my way through. I'm reading it just about like even accessibility and marking on signage, the level of accessibility of certain trails or certain systems or whatever it happens to be. The one thing I did wonder about that's not mentioned is what about like launch sites and trailheads? I just wondered if that's something that we should also be looking at, because they're not, you know, necessarily parks, but wondering if, did I miss something or if that was noted somewhere in there as well? Because I think developing some of the launch sites and trailheads for whether it's e-bikes or snowmobiles or ATVs or whatever it happens to be might be some benefit as well.
Mr. Beach, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. I think this ties into what we heard about signage and wayfinding from a lot of different groups, and that's something they would like to focus on, and that's an area that they would like to support. So with the Blue River Trails Master Plan, that was one of the recommendations. I think that's one of the first ones that is being implemented. And a big part of that signage strategy is trailhead signage and maps. And then all the other route finding trail name signs that flow out from that. Yeah, that was certainly a priority we heard about.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Director Lepso.
So I just got tweaked, and you said you didn't want to get into it too much at this time, but when you mentioned boat launches, so currently in Chase, we have a boat launch that we're looking at upgrading, and it is used by Kamloops, the regional district and everything. So I just thought I'd just kind of piqued my interest that was brought up at the same time as we're looking at upgrading a boat launch. It's in the village of Chase, but it's probably 80% used by people outside the village. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Lepso. Staff can keep that in consideration. Yeah, thank you. And perhaps the Director Lepso, you can keep TNRD staff appraised of your municipalities' next steps in that funding that boat launch improvements. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Director Lepso.
Yeah, just to follow up, because I see Director Morris there, and so we've done a little bit of chatting about it because some of her residents access their properties from the boat launch in Chase. It's their only legal access, so. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Director Morris, would you like to speak to this topic?
I would. Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I was on mute or not. Thank you. And thank you, Director Lepso. That's a great segue into one of the things that I did want to mention, and apologies for not being in the room, but the South Thompson River in general, certainly right from the Chase area and then all the way downriver, as noted, to Tobiano, pretty critical. I know from my perspective, sitting in Area P, we have some challenges, and very definitely what I would like to see in the longer term on the park asset model, I suppose, would be further exploration of the various put in, put out points that people could be utilizing and are utilizing, but also creating some messes along the way, I might add, depending where you are on the river. I'm on the river a lot because I live along the river on the South Thompson. So that one from a long-term, I guess, asset management suggestion, enforcement is overall, I'm sure is difficult throughout the entire TNRD with recreational use, but that was one that certainly came to mind, and definitely more river parkland acquisition if it is possible. That was probably the key one, and Director Lepso and I are working together on potentially, or in the longer term, solving some of the solutions in terms of access for boaters in particular as well, and finding a way to kind of work together on those projects will be intriguing, and I'm looking forward to working forward with that. And then I guess the long-term one, I would. Jamie, I guess one of the outcomes even of this conversation clearly is looking at, I assume, sort of almost the next 10-year vision of what else we are adding to our asset management and where our responsibilities lie as TNRD versus community groups. So I'll leave it at that at this point. And thank you for the opportunity to be sitting and listening and talking. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Morris. Oh, sorry, Director Smith. Oh, Director Lepso.
Yeah. So just to follow up on that briefly, so if the Village of Chase just upgrades the boat launch, it's limited to funds. But if it gets opened up to more opportunities, we have anywhere from $2 million for a total upgrade to something like 300,000 just to minimize it. So now is the opportunity to have the discussion, right? Whether, yeah.
Thank you, Director Lepso. If I am correct, you're speaking of like cost sharing between TNRD and municipality of Chase for the boat launch improvement?
Well, it could be. It's just now is the time to discuss it. But we're looking at upgrading the boat launch. Now is the time. Is there an interest? No, I think staff wants to take it back, but now would be the time to. Are we just going to Mickey Mouse it like the Village of Chase is going to do it, or is the TNRD interested in? Because that's the main boat launch to access the whole. Well, it's the public one to access the Shuswap Lake. So. Just the time for discussion is now before we build something, and then the TNRD goes, oh, well, we would have had more money to upgrade it more. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Lepso. Yeah, I would compare that to my situation in Area A in the municipality or the District of Clearwater, where about off-leash dog parks, it's been a holding pattern of between, well, if you're going to build one, then I'm going to hold off so that my taxpayer doesn't have to pay for it and such. But sorry, with your particular issue boat launch, maybe perhaps a motion to bring it to the board for discussion, because this, if we're talking about cost sharing, that seems more like a board decision. Maybe Mr. Vieira, if you can give some advice.
Yeah, I would suggest, just as the first we're hearing about it, that way we could explore that idea further. I mean, I'm just going back to looking at these recommendations, and one of the recommendations is, around partnering with existing groups and existing either community groups or organizations that have infrastructure. So this would fall in with that if the TNRD wanted to partner with the Village of Chase on upgrading. I think this is something that would be eligible through CCBF funding as well. So maybe that's warrants further discussion offline before bringing it back to the board. If that's good with Director Lepso, we can continue that discussion with Director Morris as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, Director Lepso and Morris are fine to take it offline with Mr. Vieira and staff.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Sorry, Director Thorpe, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. So with this whole collaboration and coordination thing, I have a question. So has the TNRD looked at maybe working with some of the provincial parks? For example, at the very edge of Area I is Crown Lake. And the ice climbers, there's a falls there that's across Crown Lake. And the falls is used by ice climbers in the winter. But what is happening is the provincial park closes. It's just a little pullout with a couple of campsites. So it closes. So there is no parking that is off the highway, and there's no sanitation facilities. Is there the possibility of maybe working with BC Parks to see if we can't coordinate and be able to tweak that a little bit? So for example, the ice climbers could access the falls in the wintertime. I know that this is an issue with my fellow director in the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District because it's like right on our border. Just a question.
The short answer to the question is no, we haven't engaged with BC Parks on that issue. I mean, there's opportunity to do that through this strategy. However, I would say probably the better avenue there would be more on the advocacy side, having the province, ideally the province does that without us being involved or paying for it, to put it bluntly. But if that's a identified use of that park, I think lobbying the Minister of Environment to make those changes would be beneficial.
So could this group be working on some of those advocacy pieces as well to carry a little bit more weight?
I mean, I think it's outside of the scope of this committee, where this committee's to focus on this strategy. But I think that's something more generally as the board or the EA Directors Committee could advocate for.
Ms. Madden, you have a comment?
It's fabulous to see that the recommendations are obviously hitting the mark because you guys are already coming up with things for us to do. So that's great. I just wanted to pass along that a similar thing has happened up in the Spahats Creek Falls area of Wells Gray Park, where there was usage for snowshoeing in the winter, but it was never plowed, so people couldn't get off the road. And Director Sau is very familiar with this. So what they've actually done is Argo, the local roads contractor, has plowed in a bit of an area and we've worked with BC Parks, the actual Tourism Association did, to advocate because there was a use that BC Parks was not recognizing. So I agree with Jamie that the advocacy avenue of it is the place to start, and getting BC Parks to recognize that there's a use occurring in their facility that they need to figure out how to address, as opposed to putting the cost and responsibility back onto another level of government.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Director Hall.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if Mr. Beach has the balance of the report to present to us. It seems to me that we're just going off in all sorts of different directions. I'd like to hear the rest of the report before I have a series of questions that I'd like to present, but I'd like to hear the balance of the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to Mr. Beach.
Yeah, so that was a quick overview of all of the recommendations. The next slides that I have to present deal with round 2 of engagement and how we're gonna proceed there. So if there are any further questions about the recommendations, we could deal with those now, or I could move on to the engagement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. And last call, Director Onslow, did you have one more comment? No? Okay. Yes, we're ready to proceed further, Mr. Beach. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So the second round of engagement will include a variety of methods. There'll be outreach and meetings with First Nations, an online public survey, a virtual public open house, workshops for member municipalities and provincial agencies, workshops for recreation and accessibility groups, and a workshop for tourism associations and businesses. once we've completed all this, we will summarize the findings in an engagement summary. As I mentioned, this will be launching next week with the online survey opening. It will be open for a little over a month till April 14th. This is a bit longer than usual, but because spring break falls in this period, we wanted to make sure people had a good chance to complete the survey. Invitations to the workshops will go out next week, and then we'll be hosting them at the end of March and beginning of April. Promotion of the survey and the open house through TNRD channels and invitations to stakeholders will also launch next week, and the virtual open house will be held in early April. We are targeting about 150 responses for the online survey. In the first round, we had about 350. Typically, there's a little less response for the second round of engagement. People have had their say, and unless we spark a controversy, the numbers tend to be lower. There'll be outreach to all 25 First Nations within the geographical area of the TNRD, all 11 member municipalities, 4 government agencies, including BC Parks and Rec Sites and Trails BC, around 40 recreation groups, and I've listed these on the right here. There's representation, I think, from each electoral area, and a mix of motorized and non-motorized groups. We'll also be reaching out to the 8 tourism organizations within the TNRD, and in response to comments from this committee to engage with businesses, we're reaching out to over 180 businesses, such as guides, outfitters, hotels, and bike shops. I'll pause again here for any questions about the engagement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Any questions from our attendees? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to next steps, I'll pass it over to Mr. Vieira.
Yeah, so our next steps are, we're going to be, I'm going to put it back to Ms. Madden and Mr. Beach to talk about where we go from here. But if there was any other discussion at the committee level that you wanted to have about the plan in general, the strategy in general as it is, because I guess I'll summarize, the next step is we are going back out to a second round of public and stakeholder engagement on this. So if there's any, significant or any changes, comments that this committee has that we want to incorporate into this document before we go out to the public with it, now is the time to have those comments. Then following public engagement, we'll obviously come back to you another time and tell you what we've heard, update the document based on what we've heard in the second round. But I'll put it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vieira. Director Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Beach, this is a great report, and I was really excited to see the approach that we've taken is a growth approach, one that sets out a vision. I think I heard one of my colleagues say, a 10-year vision, which I think is necessary. In the report, it states that we're underdeveloped as a region with respect to parks. And with the population growth expected within our region, I think it's only very prudent that we look at expanding park opportunities and outdoor recreation opportunities. My question to Mr. Beach is around funding and costing. In the report, it says that one of the critical aspects is sustainability of say, for example, trails. Is there an opportunity for the regional district to look at amenity cost charges as fees that are collected through Local Government Act to pay for amenities as new parks or sustainability of existing parks? I'm looking at ideas or direction as I sit on this committee as to how we can grow our system of parks and sustain our parks in other means so that we're not so reliant on taxation for the development and growth. Is there an opportunity to explore in this second tier of engagement some sort of user fee in opportunities so that we can start building a fund to help some of the EA areas that are in dire need of parks, as opposed to just relying on grants? I know grants, will come and go, but rather than just relying on taxation. So I wonder if you can maybe comment on something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And the primary funding mechanism for the parks is so far taxation. There are, I mentioned the situation with subdivision parks, how there's either parkland allocation or cash in lieu. The TNRD can now collect cash in lieu to support park development. So that's an important step. We could explore the opportunity for fee collection. At a lot of kind of passive recreation parks, it's not typical that there could be opportunities and things at places like boat launches. I think we'll have to talk with staff a bit more about what the opportunities are for amenity cost charges and that kind of thing. But it's certainly something we could explore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beach and Director Hall. Great question. Just sharing a comment and thought about that. Looking at our other orders of governments managed parks like BC Parks, I know they're one of the few ministries or departments that constantly needs tax, funding. We pay provincial taxes, and yet they still have us buy license plates to support them. Locally in Clearwater, in the North Thompson Area A, folks have reached out to me and said, hey, back in the day, we proposed a gate fee, like a toll fee for Wellsbrae Park, but it was never seriously entertained by the province. I've heard the feedback that BC Parks' philosophy is to keep things accessible and as free as possible to international visitors. But then yes, looping back to businesses that benefit from the parks, maybe MRDT and such can be looked at. But I see Ms. Madden shaking her head already. Anyway, yeah, I'll leave that to staff and Mr. Beach and the committee to discuss in the future, or Mr. Vieira.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment by Director Hall. Just a couple thoughts that are going through my mind is back to one of the recommendations around providing support and funding to outdoor recreation organizations that maybe are already have control and develop and own, or should control and operate parks or trail systems. And I think can be seen as a bit of a middle ground that we're already doing this, providing funding, and the province provides funding to trail associations, for example. But then those trail associations, they're not solely funded by those mechanisms. They also have membership fees and membership drives, and they're able to do fundraising. So get a little bit more community involvement and get more money essentially straight from the users. And that it's a nice opportunity, because if it's a regional district or a municipal owned park, doesn't look good if we're asking for people to donate. But if you're a society that maintains a trail system or a park and you're asking for donations, it goes a long way. I'll share this example because it keeps coming up just in my my own family, because my sister-in-law lives in, they recently moved to Fernie. And they're obviously Fernie's kind of the Whistler of Calgary, if you will, as a lot of people going there in the summer and winter, but specifically their mountain bike trail network. It's run by a society. They have QR codes on every signpost, and their revenue is in the millions a year just from donations of people who are touring there. And they stop and scan the QR code and donate $5. $5 pretty cheap day for mountain biking, but if you're out there, and that's a huge revenue stream. So
Thank you, Mr. Vieira. Any other comments or thoughts at this stage? No. Okay, seeing none. I adjourn, or do we, sorry, Mr. Beach, over to
So
you.
we'll loop back to next steps on the agenda, Chair, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just one last slide to share with you, and it's a recap of what the next steps are. As I mentioned, we'll be launching round 2 of engagement. When that is complete, it'll be late spring, early summer, and we'll work to integrate your feedback and staff feedback and all of the engagement feedback to revise the draft report. We'll also develop an implementation plan that will set some targets and set priorities for when these recommendations should be rolled out. And we'll dig into things like what would a reasonable amount of park development over the next 10 years be. At that point, we'll come back to the committee for a final presentation, make any last tweaks, and then I think it'll be up to the committee for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Beach. Any last thoughts and comments from Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to let the committee know that Area J was one of the areas that was identified as being deficient in these facilities. And at the same time, we have waterfront parks that are outgrowing the capability of the societies to maintain them, particularly in Savinaw. And directors will know that with the changes to the allocation of gas tax funds, contributions to third-party societies has become more difficult. So in the case of Savinaw, I just wanted to bring to the attention of the committee, they have asked for our assistance in creating washroom facilities at a waterfront park that has a boat launch, that has boat docking, that has a number of public amenities. And we find ourselves at the same time dealing with all these other issues coming from the side. I just wanted the committee to know that as the EA director for Area J, we would be very interested in allocating some of the gas tax money for Area J to help facilitate that. And that we have had some initial discussions with staff and the society, where the society is saying, this may be beyond our capability to take care of. Would you be interested to take over the waterfront park area? And that provides opportunity because when you think about that particular facility, it's used far beyond the residents of Savinaw. It is, we talked about Tobiano and access to the buoy system. Well, it actually goes all the way down to Savinaw, Kamloops Lake. And so it's a continuation of what we are already doing. And it solves one of the deficiencies that we've identified in this report, Area J. I'll just also say that recently our planning department went to the province to ask about public access at Tobiano, and the province confirmed, you may recall, directors, the province confirmed that public access to Kamloops Lake through Tobiana was one of the conditions of approval. So without getting too far into the water, that idea of tying in existing water buoy systems and public access to waterfront in those two jurisdictions in Area J could very much fulfill the deficits that you have identified through this report. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Director Grenier. If I might summarize, perhaps like a general direction to prioritize existing facilities and support them rather than going out and starting new regional parks and such. Maybe the evaluation of existing facilities that might not be, that is currently operated by third parties, and taking those on might be prioritized by our review. Yeah, thank you. Any further questions or comments from our committee or attendees? Okay, seeing none, then I adjourn this standing committee meeting. Thank you, Mr. Beach, and everybody for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.